Good evening, everyone, once again. Let me begin by thanking you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend today's roundtable. We have set today's agenda to discuss youth advocacy. Our guest panelists are activist and law student Prakshi Saha, sanitation and hygiene consultant Spurti Gopalika, gender rights and PhD scholar Srileka Chakraborty, and climate change and gender activist Mayuri Bhattacharjee. This session will be moderated by Ragini Bordaloy, policy advocate, field consultant, and sexual and reproductive health rights activist. The discussion will focus on the key issues within youth led advocacy pertaining to multiple social causes and movements. We are going to dive deep into issues like accountability, creating opportunities, tokenism, creating tangible impact, and getting young individuals involved. Through this discussion, we aim to inspire you through your own journey of advocating for issues that you deeply care about. Now, over to the moderator, Ragini.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
All right. Hello and good evening. My name is Ragini Bordaloy. I am absolutely happy to be here today and I'll be moderating today's session. I wish we could have done this in a room where we could have been all together and interact, but such are the times and we have to readjust accordingly. But the topic itself, youth advocacy, is so close to my heart and personal politics that I'm grateful that even I'm part of this and sharing space with all these incredible speakers today. And I'm hopeful and confident that by the end of this session, you will have a lot of knowledge, content, and takeaways to take away with you. And let me begin already by shooting the first question to our youngest speaker. Um, we now that we are realizing that youth involvement in politics and youth involvement in policy making is so important. I want Prakshi to talk a little about how do you think youth-led advocacy and accountability is critical to driving sustainable change?
Yeah, I would just first really like to thank Olivia and She for Change for inviting me in the company of such inspiring women whose work I have really looked up to. So thanks a lot. Coming to the question, I feel again this is just something so close to my heart because as a public policy enthusiast, as somebody who's just looking to venture into policy as a field, and as a 20-year-old, so this really aligns with what I'm going through, what I'm just struggling to figure out. Um, it is very important if just a one-line answer would be there, but it is far more important because for decades, you know, old white men, if we look like across the globe or in India, it's just like upper caste men who've just been gatekeeping all positions of power, like every possible position of power everywhere in policy and governance. Situations are worse. So if we look at throw numbers such as the average age of parliamentarians is 53, I think. The average age of leadership at the UN is 61, which is nowhere close to the average population out there. So they're very disconnected with whatever we are experiencing. They don't have an idea about what the young people want. Lack of representation is like the reason why the policy is being made and the ground concerns of people are so like lacking from each other. So young people leading the change is incredibly important, and within young people also, like women, queer people, black people, Dalits. So that representation is also far more important because we can't look at it from a one particular lens, because the intersections that lie within like each society is so varied. If we really talk about sustainable change, a change that is going to impact people and really answer all their concerns. So young people should lead that change. Within that, also every other marginalized community should also lead that change in policy making. That's when like real sustainable change is going to happen. Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I mean, intersectionality cannot be discounted. It's non-negotiable at all. And I would like to know what other speakers have to add to what Prakshi said. I'm sure you have some incredible insights to share, or else we can move to the next question also.
I'll just do a plus one to what Prakshi has said. I think especially about representation, it is super important that we demand for appropriate representation, especially if you're making policy for a particular community. And if that community is not even involved, then who are you even making the policy for? So yeah, plus one to everything what she said.
Absolutely. I think I should move to my next question, which is very, very pertinent to this discussion. For advocacy to even be successful and materialize change, the involvement of stakeholders is very necessary. You know, at the end of the day, no matter how much we do, there is an entire system that is responsible for policy making, allocating funds. So I would like to ask Sri Lekha this question because she has been involved in this for quite some time. How do you think these stakeholders can be more responsible and proactive in creating opportunities for youth engagement?
I'm mute. Which language can I use? Can I use Hindi and English both? Are people comfortable with that? Olivia? Is okay with everyone if I speak in Hindi and English?
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Okay. So the point is that my name is Sri Lekha. I've been working with the Adivasis in Jharkhand since last 7 years, and I have been closely working with the stakeholders on ground. Yes, the one thing that I've realized is that and I think it is similar to every space, and also what the other people also spoke before me is like Prakshi and Spurti, that space तो जैसा है system है वो तो that is definitely there, but I think that people trying to bring a change and making a space for them also in the system, that is also equally happening. And like for example 2014 when I started working on menstruation, जब मैंने काम करना शुरू किया था उतना ज़्यादा यहाँ पे गांव में मैंने काम होते हुए नहीं देखा था. इनफैक्ट when I was working in one of the organizations and they were only working in livelihood. So technically, coming to your questions very specifically, in the areas of hunger and poverty, women's issues and issues that talks about maternal health, that talks about menstrual health and other aspects are not prioritized technically. It always gets a backseat. So there were times, Ragini, जब 2014 I went to talk to a journalist. I asked कि आप आओ एक लड़कियों का एक सेशन ले रहे हैं महावारी के ऊपर. And then when I spoke Mahavari, that person was like, क्या मतलब आप मुझे इसके लिए सेशन के लिए इसको मैं कवर भी कर लूँ, मतलब what kind of this thing is that? तो अभी since 2014 till now, I see a lot of young activists and young people also are talking and constantly challenging this. And you know, I also believe that what we are today as feminists is also because what others have done it before. There is definitely a space and a place and people have worked on that, and then it is becoming easier for you. So मुझे जो ये लगता है Ragini, that when you say about the places and the spaces, you know, that's one very interesting like a phrase that I've heard from one very known feminist activist, and that has really helped me in areas where I struggle to find out where is my space. And that is that you know, like it is in our own lifetime we will not be able to solve an issue of the entire menstrual hygiene ka or abortion rights ka. It will always be there. The point is that from one generation to the other generation, we should create an ecosystem around us that should be carrying that same thing and should constantly tell the stakeholders that dude, we are there and we are going to work on that. No matter कि वो इस साल पे होगा या इस जन्म पे भी होगा, or there will be other people, but we should pass on that kind of kind of knowledge to the next generation also. And this was told to me by a veteran feminist activist when I was struggling कि भाई कुछ तो नहीं हो रहा है, कुछ तो नहीं हो रहा है. And then they just tell me that बस उस आग को जला के रखना and pass it on to the next generation, and also let people fight for abortion, fight for menstruation the same way that you have done, and then you will be successful. So I think seeing everybody every day coming up with new petitions, coming up with new campaigns, and always constantly challenging the status quo and telling in front of the stakeholders, I think that is enough, and that will definitely work. Yeah, Ragini.
Like, thank you for touching upon that, because personally for me, because in an Assamese society, right now, because of political issues, whenever there is a political issue, the culture itself, it becomes a there is a fear that the culture is in danger. And anything that has become a cultural norm, suppose menstruation, it has become a cultural norm, although it is so steeped in taboo, so steeped in stigma, like some of the ceremonies, that even if we challenge, it is the very people that we are trying to help that get very defensive, right? So we cannot expect that this is going to go away in one generation or like next 10 years, but having that conversation every day and just nudging or just coming up with questions is so important and pertinent to even sow the seeds of doubt, which I think is very necessary. And thank you so much, Srilekha, for sharing your insights with us. Even you have talked about youth involvement, and Prakshi has also, talked about intersectionality. So I think I have this question that we cannot deny that we have also seen a parallel wave of tokenism or performative allyship, when it comes to involving young people. Like, suppose there is a panel and you bring one young person or young Black person or one Adivasi person and just call that thing inclusive, or even say that this is how you are holding yourself accountable. We are seeing that and we cannot deny that, right? So I want both Spurti and Prakshi to talk about this. Like, how can we ensure meaningful youth engagement that doesn't reduce young people to mere tokens? How can we ensure that?
Thank you for the question, Ragini. I think firstly I learned like a word, performative allyship. But yeah, before I get to the specifics, it's it just makes me really happy to see so many young people here, and especially so many young women. I just love like watching any woman who comes forward and says, "Hey, I'm an activist." It just brings me such joy. That I was speaking to Prakshi the other day on Instagram, and just looking at her profile made me so happy. At 20, she's such a proud activist and she's questioning. And I'm 30 right now, and I'm still getting there. So I can only imagine what it would be in the next 10 years. It just feels so good. To talk about tokenism, I've really not observed much about like the youth representation, but having worked in the space of gender, maybe I can relate and talk about some things that I've seen. Yes, you're absolutely right. The first thing I think all of us should do is call it out, right? A lot of times we hesitate to call it out. For example, panels. There's so many panels, it's just men everywhere. And I found a really interesting ally on Twitter, whose entire Twitter page is dedicated to panels, right? And they just call out every panel across the country, be it in a remote village or be it in the heart of the city, be it with the PM or anywhere, they just call out. I think what that simple Twitter handle did over the time is it really started telling people that, see, this is a pattern that you see everywhere. It is happening. Are you calling it out? What that also did is gave me the confidence to question these panels in my own workplace. So small insight, I work in the policy level with a government agency in Delhi. And that small change, I think even that is really important. So if one person calls out, I think it kind of gives the other person also that push, to call out, that it is okay to call out, because especially right now, there's a lot of fear about what happens if I call out especially government agencies or people involved in higher positions, where youth especially are being pushed into operating out of fear. So I think without giving into it, calling out, that is very important. Again, performative allyship, I think it's really important to understand what are we seeking in allies, figure out how do we even want to form allies. Again, coming back from a gender space, usually, forming allies, especially with men and people who, who want to support this movement just for leveraging the space. So I think it's really important to set your indicators as to how do you want to take forward this allyship, and do not cancel immediately. Even if it is performative, then do you see a scope of making it work for you? How can you work with them together? I think how can you make them a true stakeholder? I think conversations are really important. How can we keep at it? I think these are some ways that we can ensure that there is adequate youth representation. Maybe just call out your panels wherever you see them and figure out what are your indicators to have a proper allyship.
Right. I think you made a very incredible, really good point about differentiating between call out and cancel, right? Rather than like demanding accountability and questioning the status quo, we are not saying that we are going to deplatform you or just bash you or bully you, but just acknowledging that the problem itself is there and there is an imminent need to address it. I think this demarcation is very necessary. And thank you so much, Purti, for touching upon that. Prakshi, would you like to add on to what Spurti said?
Yeah, so I agree with like whatever she said, really. But even when we're talking about making youth participation, more viable, what I feel is that there's enough participation of young people. It's companies and governments who really leveraging the labor of young people, because young people are doing the job, but they're not being allowed to lead the change. They're not being given positions of power. So there are young people doing majority of the work out there, but the heavy loading of every project, every task, but they're not being given adequate credit or positions to lead. So when I talk about like real change that I want to see young people like leading the change, to occupy positions of power and not just like do the work. Performative allyship or performative activism is something that's just so rampant, especially because I come from a generation where activism is just all about social media. So it's just, for your, there are people who start not organizations, but they do a little bit of charity because for their college applications abroad, or they just want to get brownie points on Twitter. So that is so common. So when you call yourself an ally, there are like, firstly, is that don't grab the mic, and if you're saying you're an anti-caste ally or a queer ally, if you don't come from that community, you don't have to grab the mic and talk about their issues. So acknowledging your privilege, because each of us have certain set of privileges and certain set of marginalizations. Like if I'm a woman, if my gender is a marginalization for me, my sexuality, I'm a heterosexual person, or I'm a Savarna person, that's my privilege. So acknowledging your privilege is very important, and where you don't have to speak is important. Because what I see is just people talk about everything. If you have the mic, you just grab it and start talking. So maybe when it's about caste, just let a Dalit person speak, you don't have to speak about it. So that is a very key idea of allyship to me. Second is, calling out is, of course, such a powerful tool that we have, that, all of us have a voice, because social media is such a democratic space, and seeking accountability in their actions, not just going around saying, oh, I'm a feminist or I'm an ally, but what are you doing in your everyday affairs? So I just like recall at the top of my head what happened in the last 1 week is, somebody in a very, very woke, leftist, progressive, activist space got called out because they were friends with an abuser. So that is your everyday behavior. Are you calling out your friends on their problematic behavior? Are you calling out people close to you in your circles? So your everyday behavior shows if you're a good ally or not, if you really care about the cause or not just going around with a poster or putting something in your bio. So I think
Right.
actions and behavior makes more sense than just going around claiming.
Absolutely. It's not like just saying pass the mic. I actually saw this. I heard this podcast, and this person was talking about, okay, you talk about passing the mic, but then at the moment I speak about something that doesn't suit your narrative, you will cut the cord. So we also have to accommodate like different perspectives, even though it is like in stark contrast to us, just to have, a heterogeneous dialogue space, right? So thank you so much, both Spurti and Prakshi. Like I'm already having this,
So
you
Mayur,
know, right. Mayuri is with us right now, and she has already has an incredible body of work, and recently she has done something really, really amazing. And because we are talking about social media activism, and this person right here is an example of how digital activism works and how, you know. So, Mayuri, would you like to tell us about your campaign, Dignity in Floods, and how you were so successful in bringing the government's attention to it?
Yeah, hi. It's so good to be here, and it was so great to silently listen to all the powerful voices in the room. So about Dignity in Flood. So this was a campaign I launched 2 years back in 2019. I'm from Assam, and it was after a survey and fieldwork that I did in flood affected areas, and that's what stories matter. Like on ground, listening to the stories of women and about their stories of how they faced problems during floods when they had their periods. So that made me file this petition. So at first I took a very privileged stance at it. For example, I wrote a journal article. I wrote articles on Down to Earth and all the posh journals. But the thing is, I realized after some time that I was not reaching people. I was not engaging with government who would actually make this change happen. So that's when I decided that, okay, I need to put this issue out there, and I need to do it on a platform. So why not use my privilege of having internet access and a good connection to file a petition online, which started in 2019 when I officially filed it. So since then, it has been 2 years, and in digital activism, let me tell you, though the petition was filed online, but there was a lot of on-ground, behind-the-scenes work, which which I was not always posting online, but there was a lot of work that was happening. Maybe I was amplifying it, I was posting about it and getting more signatures on the petition, and also making it more visible. So apart from the petition, the issue was what I wanted to do was raise awareness about the issue of menstrual health during any kind of disasters, like because it's a silent need, because menstruation is anyway a taboo topic, but talk about disasters and disaster response, and we talk about gender sensitivity, which is really lacking. So I really wanted to bring focus on these issues, that we need to think about the women in flood relief camps whose stories I had heard, and we need to do something about it. So apart from the digital presence, which I used to amplify and connect with more people, we also had like other tactics like sending boxes of pads to our decision makers, like a minister and the State Disaster Management Authority. So we also did that, and at the same time created social media noise around it. So I used it not just to get a petition victory, because last week, if people don't know, if you're not from Assam, you would, for the first time ever, the Assam State Disaster Management Authority put sanitary napkins in the list of essential items. Why I was harping on putting sanitary napkins in the list of essential items was it would also be symbolic that, yes, menstrual health during disasters is an issue. So that is why it was really important, a symbolic, and not only a symbolic gesture, because it also will materialize, because from now on, every flood relief camp, and we're talking about more than 4,000 flood relief camps in the state of Assam, each of these flood relief camps will have menstrual health products. So that is just change that happened, and there was a lot of online support for it, but also offline. So together with it, that's how we came to it. And that's about it. That's what I think we have been talking about. How do you use your privilege? Because the people whom I was talking to, because I then later on I came to Kolkata for my project, and I could not connect to the same women, and I had, because they were not online. So how would I use my privilege of having an internet access to bring their voices out there? So it was not just, about the petition signatures. We got more than 1.3 lakhs, but what I could do with those signatures. So that was always behind of my mind, always what I was thinking, that how do I use this privilege? How do I use it to make some change? So finally, maybe it has happened, because the notification is out, and hopefully it will create more change. I'll keep a lookout on that, whether that change happens on ground. But for now, it's a good step, I would say.
Thank you so much, Mayuri, and congratulations. And thank you for doing what you are doing, because it means a lot. It means a lot to the women. It means a lot to society. Also, can you tell our audience a bit about how do you think you can hold the government accountable? Because this is what you did, right? You showed there was a problem. You showed there was a loophole, and this is also digital activism. Also there is budgetary advocacy involved in what you did, right? You basically asked that you have to allocate this much budget into this problem. So how do you feel that you can or any young person who is watching this can actually show the stakeholder or the government or whoever is responsible that there is a loophole and you have the funds to fix this and you have to do it, how they can go forward about it?
First of all, I think I think it happens to a lot of us. When we talk about government engagement, we feel that there are only corrupt people out there. Like there are this corrupt missionaries, and we feel that, okay, like they're not going to listen to us. This government, sucks. In many ways, it does. The government does fail us, but we must also say that the biggest NGO in the country is the government, because they have the resources, they have the on-ground, people, they have the IAS, they have the civil services. So what I did was I realized that, okay, I could not just go on attacking them. I cannot say, you did not do it, you're always wrong. I had to show that, okay, you have done some women-friendly, gender-sensitive schemes in the past. You had budget for it. Because if you know Ragini in Assam, Himanta Biswa Sharma, our now chief minister, once upon a time when he was the finance minister, he had also announced giving stipends for pads. So there were some examples in the past which I used, that if you could do it in the past, you could do it easily here. And at the same time, am I still connected?
We are listening.
I'm connected, right? It just paused for a bit. I'll just switch off my video for a while. Yeah, it's raining here. So what I did was, at the same time, I also shared a lot of resources, because I was also lucky to work in the field of menstrual health. I had a lot of resources, and I just simplified them for them to see, to read up, because I understood I'm speaking to people who have never thought about this issue, and they don't know much about it. So I would send emails, maybe some of them were ignored, but I was really regular in sending emails and with resources. And I told them, look, this is what we can do. This is what has happened in Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh with women and menstrual health. So I tried to have a constructive engagement. It was really frustrating at times, because there were silent pauses, and they would not respond to you, and they would be like telling you, okay, we will do something about it. So it was, I would say it was a test of my patience. But I was also lucky to find one or two people in the government whom I found that, okay, these can be my allies. And I held on to them like, like a leech, like, okay, I'm going to be following them. I'm going to message them. So I tried to be as much as constructive as possible, not come across as someone who is going to destablish or do anything, because this is something which was not a really political issue. This was more about making a policy change, making a budgetary allocation. So finally, I think they heard it that, okay, this is also going to, I told them that this is going to, make your image positive. If you'll come across as a state which is like really gender friendly. So why don't you become the state to first take this period friendly, flat disaster measures. So I think those things work, but I would tell you it is frustrating. And there are people in the government who do not care, but there are some who will care. It's about maybe also finding them. Finding them and engaging with them, and also understanding that now there is COVID, the disaster management department was also involved in relief measures. So this notification was supposed to come out last year, but it took 6 months for them to put it out again. So that is why we have to be mindful. The government has a million things to do apart from the cause that I'm working on. So how do I make it their priority? So that's what I was trying to do through many ways. And that was not always on social media, but through phone calls and emails. So I would say lots of patience and to be a little, think from their perspective a little, that, okay, what is it that matters to them? So I think that helps.
Right. No, absolutely. Like my takeaways from what you said is like patience, lot of patience and research. You have to figure out what are the precedents, what the government has done before this, so that I can use it as evidence. And just a lot of outreach and communication. So
Yeah.
yes, thank you so much. Spurti, you also have run a campaign under hashtag Womcom Matters. Would you like to talk about it? Because I feel um, this is also pushing towards representation, and I think having enough representation also brings light to some of the topics that um, you know directly affect us. So would you like to tell us about it?
Absolutely. This is something that I can talk about very comfortably. Thank you so much for your question. But before I answer, I would like to know how many here have, are really confident about what a women's commission is, have heard or have ever engaged. A quick show of hands or a thumbs up or anything would work. Okay. I see like one hand. That's still good. Okay, two. All right. So very quickly, before I get into my campaign, a small story. I'm going to take, I think, about 4 minutes for this. So me, Sri Lekha, Mayuri, all are alumni of something called She Creates Change, which is part of change.org, which basically trains, women to understand the entire process of petition making. So when I went to this 5-day learning lab, I really wanted to do something about dowry. I'm going to give a trigger warning here. So my father's elder sister was burnt alive because of dowry issues. But that does not mean things have stopped in my own house or it has stopped anywhere else. Like just, I think the other day, my other cousin got married and of course there was dowry involved. It's as though that nobody wants to talk about dowry. No, it's not a serious issue anymore. It's like, har jagah hota hai. It just keeps happening. But when are we fighting? It's not as if, in educated crowds, it's not there. Like the marriages happen, after taking loans and goodness knows what all. So I really wanted to work on starting an anti-dowry awareness day. I mean, there's so many days, right? We just celebrated World Environment Day. So why not anti-dowry awareness day? Turns out an anti-dowry awareness day already exists. How many of us even know about it? So my next question was, if such a day exists, whose job is it to ensure that there's some awareness programs on that day? For example, if we're talking about World Environment Day, so-and-so department can do something about it. So if it is an anti-dowry awareness day, of course, the first department that comes to your mind is Women and Child Welfare Department. But then there is nothing under their jurisdiction, right? They're so involved in their ICDS and other women welfare programs. Another research led me to Women's Commission. So Women's Commission is not just a grievance redressal body. It is not just when you go to them because you have a grievance that police and court failed, but they are the only body that can be responsible to suggest the government on what kind of policy initiatives to take. If you read the act, it's a very small act, and I highly recommend each of you read the act, especially as women. It's really important to know our rights. It very clearly states that there's supposed to be an annual report every year, and the recommendations given by the Women's Commission have to be considered by the government. And if the government is not taking a recommendation, they also have to tell you why. Right? And it has the powers of a civil court, which means I can call the person who is accused, and I can call the person who is filing the complaint, and I can figure out what to do with this case, and I can suggest what has to be done next as well. So imagine the power. Now, of course, my next question was, what did my state commission do? So I'm from the state of Telangana, and we are so-called, the growing digital hub of India, and I couldn't find anything. And at this point of the time, my state had a website for sheep. It had a website for trees, and it did not have a website for Women's Commission. So I had no clue what this was doing. There was just one number available. We called, and there was obviously not much response. So we said, we need a website. So that is where my petition started in 2018. I said, I want a website because I really want to know what my government is doing. Of course, 2018 December, the horrible Disha incident happened. Before we go to the point that encounter had happened, the fault was the police did not even take the case, right? They did not even register. They said she might have gone out, she's going to come back. But for some reason, my state doesn't want to focus on that element. Right, this clearly shows that we need sensitization of the police. We need to raise awareness in the citizens about the helpline that already exists. Because if me as a woman, I'm feeling more comfortable to call my family somewhere else than the helpline, that means clearly I do not have trust in your helpline. That means we have to improve this helpline as well. So that is where our journey started, and then we realized there's no commission at all in the state. So we changed our ask, saying that, hey, we need a women's commission right now in the state. And what happened in the journey is, once I launched my petition, people from different social media said, hey, this is such a basic ask. I mean, do we even have to ask for this? Right? I think sometimes we really have to acknowledge that some of the basic things, unless we ask, we're not going to get it. And that is something that could relate with Mayuri's petition as well. I mean, this is so basic. Do we really have to ask to have sanitary pads as an essential item during floods? Like, come on, right? But those are the smaller things that we have to ask, because unless we ask, we're not going to get it. So slowly there was a group of people who said, hey, let's work on this together. And I had like about 100 people who said, hey, I want to do something. I want to do something. And I'm sure all of you will find this eventually in your own campaigns. There's so many people who really want to work with you. So here's where your leadership comes in. Then how are you going to form allies with them? How are you going to work together? How are you going to have shared values together? How are you going to help a vision? How are you going to share those steps? So what we decided is we wrote down what skill sets each of us have, and we said, hey, let's just try and stick to this. Let's just give 30 minutes. Even if we don't know what we're doing with those 30 minutes, let's just assemble and talk. So it can start with just 30 minutes every day. So one person started, applying RTIs. I think we filed some 6 RTIs. We realized some 200 cases pending with the Women's Commission. There was some 1 crore unutilized, or, we were not even receiving funds the next year, etc. Right? There's so many issues that came to light. And this was the same data that somebody picked up and filed a PIL in the High Court. We did multiple campaigns. We did Twitter storms. We literally went into parks. This was pre-COVID. We went to parks and we were just talking to people randomly. It's like, do you even know about this? Do you even know about this? I think it came to a point where like everybody knew that we were running the campaign, but for some reason, our decision maker was still not giving us this response. So we started organizing small 30-minute awareness calls on, what is Women's Commission? We said, if we have just 10 new people, we're going to have this act reading. We're going to read the act together. And when people read the act together, they were surprised. They were like, are you kidding me? It has 15 functions, everything that you need as young women for safety. It is very clearly there, but nothing is in implementation, right? So I think information gives you power. So how are we sharing that information? How can we build power together? Then there were volunteers who came together and said, okay, if the government is not going to build a website, let's build a website ourselves. And I had 4 volunteers in different time zones, all of who came together, and they've built a website called womcommatters.in, and they've listed down all the helplines. They've verified them. There's a Telangana map. You click on each district, it'll give you district-wise helplines of each of the government agency, their numbers, even the NGOs, local NGOs that you can reach out to. And over the last year, especially after COVID and because of the lockdown, we've received so many distress calls, and this page was really helping us. Then we also realized that there's so much body shaming happening. There's somebody who came in and said, hey, I really want to talk about body acceptance and body shaming. I said, okay, I don't know what to do, but there's a platform and I offer that to you. So she just came over, she made a name, she said Bodylog, and she just made it into a listening circle. Then there was somebody else who said, there's literally so much that I want to rant sometimes. So we said, okay, let's just have rant nights. We're just going to have 30 minutes where we just come and then we rant and then we go. So when we spoke about allyship previously, right, these are just some examples of how you can ask what is it that we can do together always. And finally, of course, we got our Women's Commission very recently in January. We still don't know what they're doing. So we're going to file that next RTI to understand what they're doing. But meanwhile, what we did is we started a fellowship called Awaaz Telangana Fellowship, because there are so many other young women in my state who said, I really want to do something as well. So for the last 6 months, we've been training them every month, and 4 brilliant petitions have come out of it. The first one is safety in buses against street sexual harassment. So they have a very simple ask. They said in all the city buses of Hyderabad, please install an announcement system, which is going to serve as message reinforcements. This is so budget friendly. It can be completely doable. And they're already in talks with the transport minister. The next team said, there is no implementation of POSH in my state. In fact, we don't even have data about it. And unless we have data, how can we make any policy changes? So please do a third-party assessment of POSH in our state and publish those results. They've already met the decision maker. They've already had 2 discussions, and the WCD department invited the entire team to work with them together. This is another example of how, do not see government as a body you cannot reach out to. In fact, the people who want to work with you. The third, one of my favorite, is they're asking each and every party to give 50% tickets in the upcoming assembly elections, and they've already met 3 top political parties, and they're in discussion. So I'm really, proud of them. And the final one, again, one of my favorite, is she's asking for SRHR curriculum in degree colleges, because she believes that this is the age where we should be talking about it more and in formal settings and spaces, because in schools there is just like 1 or 2 pages or a chapter, and then maybe we're talking more about it because we're vocal post graduation. But the age that we really want to talk about, and we have so many questions about all the crushes and so many things in life, we really don't have anybody to talk to. So she's really fighting to get it into the curriculum. So yeah, there's really so many ways that you can work out. And currently we're running a campaign called Call Your MP and MLA campaign, where we're literally calling our MPs and MLAs and asking, hey, what have you done for your constituency, or what are you doing for your constituency? And we're making reports, and we've partnered with Young India Foundation, and we're going to publish the results very shortly. Yeah.
So this is really incredible, really incredible. And I think it is an example how activism, is beyond petitioning, and how even digital activism has so much, allied aspects, related to it and involved in it. And how, what you narrated about your experiences and what really went into WOMCOM matters is that to reach out to a community and make their voices heard. And this is something that I have also found out, and I'm very inspired by it, that the moment you give someone a space to make their voices heard, it's incredible how so many people turn up and say, hey, I want to make a change. I want to do something. And one really great example of how storytelling has been used in activism is by one of our speakers, Srilekha, like how she has used art and storytelling start a conversation about such a stigmatized topic like menstruation and menstrual hygiene. It's really inspiring, and I want Srilekha to take the stage and share some of her insights regarding this.
Thank you, Spurti. It was like going through the entire, because I was there in that cohort as a facilitator when you came. So it was like going through the entire learning lab and how it all happened. It's like a entire thought process. So in terms of when it comes to storytelling or art, I want to add 2 things over here. और आज हम लोग बहुत सारे policies वगैरह में बात कर रहे हैं. There are 2 things that I wanted to share is that whenever we try and go and talk about anything around health, anything around menstruation, anything around maternal health, our target is like we want to go and reach out youth, the more youth population on ground. And the kind of content that we take is always very text heavy, and we take books and materials, and there's hundreds and hundreds of dashboards being made and there are all these boxes and all. मतलब गांव के लोगों को और अदर पीपल उनको ये सब फर्क नहीं पड़ता है कि तुम क्या क्या वो सब लेके जा रहे हो, डैशबोर्ड उसको नहीं करना है वो सब. तब then I realized that, you know, when talking about how to bring in a change, and my campaign's name was Periods Pe Charcha, how exactly we can bring in more innovative ways to talk about menstruation on ground. And then I realized that art, I mean, wall writing is one of the most important kind of medium which reaches to people in semi-literate area, जहाँ पे लोगों को उतना education नहीं है, drop out से बहुत सारे लोग वहाँ पे if you are throwing a message out of in wall writings, it gets a lot of more people to go through that or to read that. For example, imagine the entire campaign which government has done on Hum Do Hamare Do, and the art and everything, the symbols that's been written, it has really reached out to many people. So when Swachh Bharat Abhiyan came into the scene in 2014, I realized that the entire motive was that government wanted to bring a comprehensive sanitation to the rural India, technically. Or government has spent a lot of money in the campaign, in the wall writing. मतलब काफी सारी creative चीजें कर रहे थे वो लोग. Like for example, there were wall writings like there was an entire कौन बने करोड़पति का scene as a wall writing. Like Amitabh Bachchan was sitting with somebody, and then Amitabh Bachchan was saying कि 1 करोड़ का सवाल का क्या जवाब है, and then the guy is saying कि हम bathroom बनाएंगे. And it was really fun to see so many different kinds of wall art and creative things coming up. But so there was this one time I was working in West Singhbhum, and then I had to go to Pakur, and then I had to go to Khuti, and entire like 5-6 districts in Jharkhand. And been painted and repainted and nice messages and all. लेकिन menstruation पे कोई बात नहीं हो रही थी. Like as if स्वच्छ भारत campaign में wall art के अंदर menstruation was not even a thought or a thing, और hygiene के बारे में कोई बात ही नहीं कर रहा था उसमें. So then I realized that why is there not a single wall art that is talking about menstruation, and it has to be done. Then there's another fellow who works with us in this entire group which Spurti shared called She Creates Change. Her daughter was basically an artist, and in one random conversation, I was in Bombay, we said that let's actually paint on ground. Then I spoke to a few of the artists, and they all came on ground, and the entire thought process of changing the idea was that we did not go to the community to start with something like abhi hum log paint karenge and we will paint and everybody will sit down and see. I pitched this entire idea to a organization, and they agreed to it. We got the funds. We said that we want 15 to 20 children and adolescents and youth to paint, to teach them painting and everything, and to bring out an entire theme of if we are having a wall art on ground, where it should be, what it should be, and how are we planning to execute it. So the 10 days we entirely planned of how to paint and how to have the storytelling and all. And from the scratch of storytelling, of how to design it, what colors should go, everything, it was by the community people. And it was definitely a laborious work, but we were trying to bring in a change in a discourse. Never before have anybody seen people painting on menstruation on the wall. Then we also prepared some leaflets with us, and we went to the community. It was around April and May in the month, in the year of 2019. So what we did was that we thought, let us actually go at 5 o'clock in the morning. So हम लोग 5 बजे उठ के सब गांव में चले जाते थे, and we were painting and all. And then people used to वो brush करते हुए आते थे और पूछते थे क्या बना रहे हो. And then we used to sit and talk with them about periods. And we used to give them leaflets. Everybody who used to cross that road, and we selected those spots also where it was either like, you know, junctures of bigger districts or places. It was near like a place where people will come to fetch water and all. So when you are doing a kind of an advocacy on ground, you have to take care of everything in terms of कि कौन सी जगह पे हो रहा है, वो क्या messaging आप दे रहे हो. It was a different thing to bring all together everybody, but also to be very sensitive as to what messaging is also going on ground. So and in about 15-20 days, we were able to bring up a mural, a wall mural, in two wall murals actually. And I'm sure by now I would have done a lot more, because a lot of more funders, a lot of people have also reached out. But yeah, Corona happened and I couldn't. But I'm just waiting that when everything will be fine, because I really love doing it, and I realized that if you are trying to reach out to more adolescent and youth, and you have to have storytelling and art and everything that is more creative, I mean, that is exactly what we have to do. So yeah, done. Ragini?
No, actually, this was so insightful because I want to share a little bit, a little anecdote. Like, there was this awareness session going on about poverty alleviation, and this person just quoted Marx and like other Marxist scholars to a group of rickshawalas. Okay, so I'm not saying that I'm not actually not patronizing and not saying this in a condescending tone, that this section of people will not be able to understand, will not be able to comprehend theory, academic theory. But the point is that you cannot be so tone deaf, right? You have to have, your language should be accessible. The way you are approaching the topic, the way you are approaching the community, it has to be done in a way that is comfortable to the community, that the community itself feels okay to be part of the conversation, right? So I feel that your point actually is very, very resonant. I have seen people from my own circles who have just, been very, very tone deaf, when it comes to their activism and awareness raising, campaigns. But then this actually, what you did is a very, very brilliant example of
Can I
how.
can I add something to it, Ragini, just before we
Yeah,
end? Just something
right.
to, I want to add this, okay? And also because this discussion happened previously also. You know, when I and yeah, I am from an upper caste family. I have been in a family where I have not understood casteism so clearly and differences also so clearly until I started working on ground. And what I've also wanted to say is that, where, and I think Prakshi was also talking about taking spaces about
Hmm.
here. I would honestly say this, Ragini, when I came down to start working, when I wanted to start working on ground, there was a point where I used to feel that हाँ मतलब ठीक है, I will be like one of them. I'll change. I'll
Right.
change to one of them. मतलब मैं ये करूँगी. But then, also just to add up to what Prakshi said is that I mean, today, yes, and then it took me years to realize that my identity is not going to change. I am going to function from the place where I am functioning. And so that is the point. But then again, I am a person who is still trying to talk about Adivasi communities and trying to bring out a change. And I cannot define, and I cannot go away from the identity and the baggage of privilege that I carry. I will carry. I'm still a Savarna woman, and I'm still trying to work on with Adivasis over here. There's a constant check that I always do for my own in terms of my privilege all the time. And there has been many times when I realized that and I actually the day I realized that I am not one of them and I can't be one of them, and
Right.
there is differences and there will be a beauty, but still this is my contribution, and I really would be contributing that in my field. And there can be hundreds of people who can come and challenge me that maybe my discourse is not that intersectional. Please come with me and please also work it out, and I'm happy to help. But also I am not going to stop or not going to only give it away, give it one identity of me, making it so empowering that I'm going to take away every other thing that I can do with my privilege.
Right.
So
Right. That is actually a very important point because, you know, what you did was enable the very community to, you know, address their own problems. That is one thing, that you enable one community to address their own problems, give them a voice, give them a platform. And the other is you become the face of the very movement, which I feel we cannot be as Savarna women, right? So, this is really an important conversation to have.
absolutely. I think I
Right,
have changed. I have also changed, and I have not been. I don't want to be the face of
right,
no one, even not like some
Right.
other woman also in that case. I don't want to be a
Absolutely.
any identity. I just could do whatever I could, and I'm absolutely okay. I'm learning every day to have more intersectional understanding in my discourse also. So
Right, right. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Srilekha. It was very insightful. And now I would like to, ask Spurti about a campaign she has been running called Blood Safai, and I think it's very, very interesting. Yesterday was World Environment Day, and I think it is a very pertinent conversation to have. So, Spurti, over to you.
I think this is Sri Lekha's campaign.
no, it was Prakshi's
It was Prakshi's campaign, yeah.
No problem. I think it just, we all are running a lot of campaigns and Ragini got confused. But, when I talk about my campaign, the first thing that I want to mention is, how inspired I am by people around me and people who have come before me. So I have been so inspired by Mayuri's campaign when I started off. And then I think it went, like I paused the work for a while. And then when I saw her petition become a success, I was like, oh my God, I have to get back on it. And even, when people are talking about how much other people just come and help you, the value that absolute random strangers on the internet and even otherwise, but I say this because, in my experience and my work has been on the internet. So, and especially women, I have to specify this, like absolute stranger women who just come and help you. And I will mention this when I started my campaign, when I reached a point where we had like few signatures, but we were really unable to reach out to the decision maker. So I followed Mayuri on social media and like we spoke a couple of times just about her petition. And then she saw my petition and she was like, okay, how can we help her? And then she reached out to Sri Lekha, who had a mutual contact. And that's how I reached out to my decision maker. And I did not know them at all before this. So I was like, oh my God, it's just strangers on the internet who did so much for just helping somebody else fight for a cause. So the solidarity and the support you get from other women has been so overwhelming. And overall about the campaign, I would say that, I just started last year and it's been crazy. Yes, sisterhood is like really so important, and that's what I realized with the little work I've done. So my campaign has been like there's been highs and lows. I remember in July 2020 I started, and the first month was crazy. It was just very active. I had all the enthusiasm, so every day on social media I used to post and like reach out to people. And so the first week I got 500 signatures, okay. And so by second week I was hoping I'll get 1,000, and I had like set deadlines for myself that by the end of the month I would probably wanted 2K or 3K signatures. And that's what I was doing. And then in the middle of the month, like second week, end of second week, my petition just blew up. Okay, so we got I think the 10th or 12th day we got 10,000 signatures. The next morning we got 25,000, and 3 days later 50,000. And I'm like, what is happening to my petition? It was just not making sense to me anymore, because sometimes you just don't expect and things just happen. That was all great. I was so overwhelmed and I was like, oh my God, so much of support. So I think for a local for a local campaign, it was just about my city and about menstrual waste management. I thought it was a very niche area which maybe not a lot of people would be interested about. But so first month it was great, the response I got with regard to signatures. Then it was a little difficult because we struggled for like 2-3 months just trying to reach the decision maker, and we wouldn't get any leads, calls and emails, and just nothing was working out. So when you run a like petition or a campaign, you have to be okay with sometimes things just working and sometimes things not working at all, because there'll be months where nothing is happening and you'll be like, okay, we've just made no progress. And then even when I reached out to the decision maker, I think one thing is very important is the research that you do, because you literally have to spoon feed them. Okay, so when I just mentioned that there's a similar thing happening in another city of India, so my campaign ask was segregation and treatment of menstrual waste. And that happened because I'm from Kolkata. I went to Pune for my college, and that's where I saw it's happening. So the Red Dot campaign in Pune was started in 2017. The government only started, the campaign started way before. And so they segregated, and then it was started by a collective of sanitation workers. So it was from the perspective of their rights, their well-being, their health. So I was like, okay, this is happening somewhere in the city. So that gives you a lot of incentives that it can be done on ground. So when I told the municipal corporation and the mayor that this is happening somewhere else, they were like, okay, this is happening. So you give us all the data you can about how this is happening. And I spent 1 month researching and calling up every possible person in Pune, and I was here. And I didn't know a lot of people in Pune. So I called my college professors and literally anybody I could find, trying to get all the research. So the government really doesn't like to do their own research because they have the resources. If you really spoon feed them, they'll probably listen to you or like consider it. So a lot of research goes into running a petition about the sustainability of the model, about how feasible it is. So I think that was a part of the campaign, which was just boring work, but like a lot of work we did. And then there'll be other things happening, you know, as I think Spooty said, the government has just 20,000 things to do. So then and this is the municipal corporation that I'm talking about. My decision maker was a mayor. So then there's the health care crisis that's happening. So there's COVID. I was like, oh, that's their priority, you know. You will also feel guilty about asking because so much is happening. And there was a storm here. I was like, so May was so many things happening. I was like, my campaign will be the last thing that they want to look at. So they just have too much on their plate. We need to keep pushing, right? So it's been 11 months since I started. So right now we are at 80,000 signatures, which is I'm very thankful for the support we've got. I met the mayor once. I have been in touch with somebody from the solid waste management department of the municipal corporation. I got him all the research, and in the middle for 3 months, not 3 months, April 2.5 months, they were like, oh, we have elections, so we can't work now because there's a model code of conduct where you stop your functionaries of the state only completely. Like, oh, come to us after 3 months. So things keep delaying for n number of things. You just need to keep at it. Like I think somebody spoke about patience. Like really, sometimes gets very frustrating, but you need to keep at it when you're engaging with the government because that's what it takes. A lot of time, a lot of nudging. So I'm like, okay, it's about to be a year, and I've like resumed my campaigning again so that we can like reach out now and push for it because now I've given them all the data. I don't know where they stand about whether they want to do it or not or delay it forever. So I'm a little confused state with regard to my petition. But learning, I think this process has just taught me so much because with regard to decision maker engagement, about reaching out to people, communication, outreach, all of that. So yeah, it's been a very, very wonderful learning experience and help from women across who just really come forward and help me without me asking for it. So that's been very
Right,
over.
right. And you know what I have learned from this conversation today is that how inspiration is so infectious. Like one person can stand up and it's like a catalyst. That person becomes a catalyst for change because all of us are sitting in different parts of the country, but you doing something is inspiring me today, who is sitting in Assam. Right. So inspire. One person doing just doing the work itself is such a motivation, and likewise, like we say, it's a domino effect. It just keeps on motivating one person after the other. So really, really insightful conversation from all of you. Thanks a lot. And like we are nearing the end of this discussion, and I would like to put up a question that I want all of you to answer, and then we'll open the floor for questions from our audience. First, I would like to Spurti to comment on this, then Trilekha, then Mayuri, then Prakshi. All right. So it's about like very briefly, how do you think we can drive more young people to take up advocacy that's sustainable and even tangible in the real world? how do we inspire them, and how do we just give them the impetus to take the first step? How do we do that?
I think one way is to have more such roundtables. Definitely a lot of conversations, a lot of stories. I think stories are what inspire actions. I'm a huge fan of stories. So yeah, I think my first go would definitely be that. I think especially if if all of you here are leaders in your own space and want to, run advocacy campaigns, have lots of conversations, create a platform, be willing to listen, partner, engage, do not cancel immediately. Seriously, try and form as many allies and friends in the way, and you would be surprised to see how forward this is going to go together.
So what I would like to add up to this is that every 5 years जब वोट की बात आती है तो टेलीविजन पे एडवर्टाइजमेंट्स ऐसे चलते हैं कि युवा आओ वोट करो, बट आई एम ट्राइंग टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट उसके बाद में जो 5 साल के बीच में ऐसे कितने सारे एडवर्टाइजमेंट्स होते हैं जहाँ सरकार आके खुद बोलती है कि गेट अप एंड आल्सो क्वेश्चन योर गवर्नमेंट. आई डोंट थिंक सो दैट पीपल in the communities, in the rural communities also, they think that advocacy is also something that they can be a part of. For example, मैं एक गांव में गई थी and I was trying to do a survey on the आंगनवाड़ी schools, and सर्व शिक्षा अभियान started in 2010. उसके बाद से 20 में I went to few villages to do some survey. तब उतना खराब नहीं था कोरोना. Few women, when I went to speak to them that आप बताओ कि क्या क्या services है, what are the things and all these young people, they were like, they were so surprised to even know that I came to the village to understand कि भाई उनका क्या opinion है और क्या change कर सकते हैं. They were like, but this is already government thing, हमको मिल रहा है. So वो जो service से लेके जो आंदोलन की बात करते हैं हम लोग, rights based बात करते हैं ना, lot of people still think that it's a service that government is trying to do and giving them everything subsidized is a service thing, but it's more important to make them understand that it's a rights based thing. And also equally government should also stand up and say that also make us accountable, or they should also be like they should also work on having a more open platform for young people to come up and talk, but I don't see that as that happening. And if that happens and government also comes up and says that we are in this together in terms of the partnership, I think it can only happen then, or else it's not possible. Mayuri.
Oh, hi. Yes, sir. Sorry, it's like really raining like anything. You see, hear a lot of lightning right now. So, so I really feel I speak from my perspective. So, as a young person, let's say 10 years back, internet was not booming. So, internet really opened up a lot of things for me. I believe. So the thing is, to have more young people, we need to understand that this is a digital age. We also need to have more people connected and not just be on internet, how to use the internet. I think that's what we miss. People are on Instagram, but can we use Instagram for change? So I think these kind of fellowships, and of course these help, but these kind of fellowships, there are a lot of fellowships out there. They should also be opened up. There should be scholarships for people who cannot afford certain trainings, and we should, empower them. And it should be not only done by government, but also NGOs or corporates. So, and when we say we want to involve young people, I would say from the perspective of companies, why don't they have young people as board members? Why do you always need to have older people there? So we really need to see people in positions of power. And when Srilek have made a good point, like government should have these sessions with youth and listen to them. So why isn't your youth minister always like, you will not see not many young people, being there. So we're talking about 50% reservation of women. Of course, that is really important. But we should also talk about now youth, reservation. Like how much of the tickets are we giving to young people, and do they have a voice in your party? How much are they visible? So I think it's more about from not only government, but also the private sector, and also from us. And even from the young people, I think it should, I mean, people who are privileged like us, I'm talking about people like me, we should also see that, okay, what are the laws in my country? How can I use something like the RTI as basic? Apart from the RTI is really important for knowing your passport application, but you can also use it. For example, a few years back in Kolkata, I used the RTI to know how many public toilets are there in Kolkata, because I wanted to know how many of them are functioning. And I use RTI, and you know, the information is out there. So apart from internet research, government also can give you information, and there are these tools which are there. We have to know how to use it from our end. I mean, not be just passive. I mean, I'm speaking to people right now who are on the internet, all of you who are joining. So let's use it. I mean, let's not just be passive participants in it. Let's use the internet. Let's use the tools that it has given us.
I like completely plus one, echoing everything that everyone said, agreeing. But with regard to, I think in positions of power, when we talk about it, we've been, I think, asking politely for a seat at the table for far too long, you know, and things haven't changed. So I heard someone say this. So just like echoing that thought is that if you realize that you politely asking for a seat at the table is not working anymore, then just create a table of your own. And that, I think, is a great thought in, say, for example, not just government wise, what entrepreneurs are doing right now, right? So if they're not really able to make sustainable or meaningful change to a corporate world, they're just creating their own system where they're leading the change. Or what, like, I see in the last few years, so many policy think tanks are being founded by 20-year-old somethings. They're advising the government because they have so much research and experience. And so yeah, just creating your own table, do your own thing, start your own thing if you really feel the organizations in place who have existed for decades are not giving you your due credit. Challenging the status quo is important. So the other day I was having a conversation with somebody on my podcast, Aurora Akanksha. She is the 34-year-old person who's running for Secretary General of the UN. And crazy, but UN talks about democracy, does not have proper elections, and it's a 70-year-old white man who she's fighting against. So she's the first young person, first woman of color. She's breaking so many glass ceilings, and it can probably be an almost impossible task for her to win, because the UN just acts in its own ways. They don't even give her a hearing. Her name might not be in the ballot box. But you know, we will probably remember even if she loses, we will remember that she fought. She just went and said that I'm going to challenge the incumbent because I think I can do a good job. So just to stand up and say, no matter what the consequences are, no matter you succeed or you, just to say that you're going to challenge the status quo and, like, you know, I'm going to lead the change is very important for young people, I think.
Absolutely.
Just one more thing.
Continue.
This is, you know, especially for those who are beginning, I think it's really important to know when to pause and when to celebrate. I think two really, really important things, especially right now. I think the last 2 years, I've had the opportunity to work with younger people, you know, from 16 to 24. And some of the things that I've realized is, one, there's a lot of energy and anger, which if not channeled, just results in knee-jerk reactions, and then, you know, disappointment in the self, and then further mental health issues. So I think it's really important to understand that you know, that we have to focus on mental health, self and the team, invest in those spaces. You know, just because somebody says, I want to work with you, don't assume, you know, their commitment 100%. How are you going to engage, you know, truly create meaningful relationships for yourself and for your community together, and really take out the time to celebrate each and every achievement. Achievement is not just when, you know, what you advise goes into a policy, because most of the times policies are just documents, right? By the time it gets implemented, it takes forever. So really celebrate each and every small achievement. Take out that time, you know, write down what you're grateful for that day, and really invest in your mental health, because you have to do this for what, the next 50, 60 years. So yeah, really do invest in this.
You know what? I have been noting down everything you are saying so that, I can implement it in my own advocacy. And I think this is what conversations does. This is what, sharing stories does. It just inspires you, tells you where to look when you don't know where to look, and gives you an actual roadmap. So this is this has been a really great conversation, and I'm so grateful that I got to share space with all of you today. And I think it's time for us to open the floor for more questions.